Support for this episode comes from Modern Football Technology. Modern Football Technology provides real-time opponent tendencies and self-scout while eliminating manual data entry into Huddle, DV Sport, and Exos. If you're tired of tools that are time-consuming to learn and perform inconsistently at best, then we recommend Modern Football for a fresh perspective. Schedule a demo today at teammofo.com to see a battle-tested tool that's proven to perform and deliver value. Mention Coach and Coordinator Podcast or use the coupon code CC10 to receive 10% off your first year. And listen to our recent episode featuring Folsom High School defensive coordinator Jordan Ersick to learn more about how the 2023 California State Champion uses modern football to dominate their opponents.
Beyond that, we probably, like, if you came to a session with me, that's probably the first 20 minutes is working on mechanics. And then the rest of it, like, we're going to get out there and we're going to get rolling. Like, we're going to bring receivers in. We're going to go through pass drops. We're going to work on how to read the field, eye progression. That was something that was like where I think Dan really opened my eyes, was eye progression, and how the eyes move and scan into routes and that kind of thing. So working and helping kids do that has been something that I've really spent time on.
We're back for another week of our Passing Lab series. Another good one here with Drew Ambros, who's the offensive coordinator at Franklin High School in Wisconsin. And joining me, as he does every week, to host this series is Josh Herring, who's the quarterback coach at Lassiter High School. So, Josh, it's been a fun and exciting series so far. Some great information shared by these coaches, and this is certainly another one in line with that.
Yeah, this one's really enjoyable. Drew's a great guest. That you always look for guys at really good programs, and he's a part of a really good program. And I think the big thing is also a lot of get further and further north and maybe gets a little more cold. You can't throw, and that's one of the things where you're going to hear Drew talk about in the pod, is that's a myth. And so that's good for all the passing game guys out there to have that as ammunition.
Well, it's good and it's bad. I mean, there's probably a lot of guys out there who don't want people to know that you can't throw in the cold.
That's right. Absolutely.
Well, as I said, it's another enjoyable one. So here's our episode with Drew Ambros, offensive coordinator at Franklin High School in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. What you see on tape is a direct reflection of what you teach and how you teach. Video is important, but if you don't teach well, you're not going to like what you see on your video. First Down Playbook has been helping coaches teach better for 13 years. It allows you to present installs, playbooks, and practice cards in half the time with NFL quality. Coaching tools like video pairing, a player app, practice schedules, and wristband sheets have made First Down Playbook a program management system with everything in one place. If you're in a position of leadership with your football program, receive a free 1-week look at First Down Playbook. Call them at 512-814-6158 or visit them on their website or social media. Mention Coach and Coordinator Podcast or use the coupon code COACH24 to receive a $100 discount off the normal $700 First Down Playbook team membership price. Links and the phone number are in the show notes.
Welcome, everybody, back to the Passing Lab. Really excited about tonight's guest. We've got Drew Ambros. Drew is a great passing game mind. He's the offensive coordinator at Franklin High School in Wisconsin. They were 2021 state champions. You may know Drew's also heavily involved with some clinics that have taken place. He really got the ball rolling on the Zoom clinics for the Wisconsin Football Coaches Association. And I'm super excited to talk to Drew about the passing game. Drew, thanks for being on, man.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on, man. It's been good. You and I kind of connected a little bit recently, so it's been good getting to know you and talking ball. So I'm excited.
I know people are going to love what you got to say tonight, and we're going to jump right in. So you are a guy who loves to throw the football, and you're in Wisconsin. And there are people who would probably think, that those things do not go hand in hand, and the guys that there's still a misconception that you can't throw the ball in bad weather or cold weather. We've got people listening all over the country. Talk to us about what life is like in the frozen tundra up there, throwing the rock around.
Well, actually, so here's a good statistic for you to kind of, I don't know, alleviate maybe that myth a little bit that you can't throw the ball when it gets cold and nasty outside. So the we won the state title in 2021. And if you look at take our statistics from the state quarterfinals, the semifinals, and the finals game, we threw for 985 yards and we rushed for 307 yards, and we won the state title. So in November. So, I think the guys that I know, I've seen that on social media quite a bit too. Guys talk about, well, hey, if you want to win a state title in Wisconsin, you got to be able to run the ball. Well, we did run the ball a little bit, but we threw the ball a lot more, and we had a lot more success throwing the ball. So it can be done. Now, the weather, it wasn't crazy for those 3 games. The quarterfinal game was probably maybe in the 40s or something like that. So it wasn't too bad. Now, the semifinal game was pretty brutal. It was like 35 and raining all day. So it sucked. It was windy out. It was nasty. I was in the box and I was freezing. I was wearing my winter jacket plus a hoodie underneath it, and I was freezing up there. And then the state title game was like in the 30s and windy, and we were still able to throw the ball. So, I'm not saying that everybody can do that, but that's what we were good at that year, right? Like we had a quarterback that's now at the University of Wisconsin. We had a receiver who's at the University of Iowa, and our 2 other receivers are, one is playing Division II ball at Winona State in Minnesota, and the other one is still with us right now. He's going to be a senior this year. He's already got some D2 offers and some FCS offers. So we had really good players, and that's what we were good at. So we kept doing it. Now, we've had some games, typically rain affects us more than like cold and snow. I think we've had one game that I can remember in the past few years. I think it was at 2019 where it snowed during the game, and it really had little to no effect on us. The kid that was our quarterback that's at playing for the Badgers now was a sophomore, and I think we won that game like 49-14 or something. So, do we have a plan for it? Yes. If the weather is that bad and we're having troubles, like we'll probably go under center a little bit more. We do still do that. I know a lot of teams don't anymore. We practice that every day. We can run our whole offense from under center if we need to. And then, we obviously have past concepts that we feel more comfortable when the weather is bad. But, it varies too, depending on who that kid is. If it's a kid that we feel, confident that he can get out there and sling it when it's nasty outside, then we're going to keep doing it. So that's kind of my philosophy on that. So
that's great stuff. For me, rain, whatever, never practiced, but never played a game in snow. In Georgia and Alabama, it's never snowed during a game. For us, it has before, but not for us. Wind, wind bothers me a little bit. That's something you worry about. I'll give you one quick tip. I probably shouldn't give this secret, but this is a super secret thing about in Georgia, if it gets like below 50 degrees, we're losing our mind about the cold. So go to your local Chick-fil-A that supports your program. Get those warmers that they use for chicken sandwiches. Put your balls in them in pregame. Quarterbacks love it. So that's free advice for you guys out there. That's a super secret thing that we've used in our program. You got any super secret things that you use in Wisconsin to make sure the ball's ready to go, your quarterback's hands are warm?
we actually have one of the bags that like the NFL teams have. They're actually designed to put the footballs in, and they're made to. You can actually they have little pockets to put hand warmers in them. So I don't know that everybody has that. We actually got introduced to it by our baseball coach. So he had bought some other bags from I forget the name of the company now. And he just pulled me aside one day. He's like, hey, I was looking through the catalog and they have football ones for you guys. They're like $200. You guys want one? And I was like, absolutely. Like, we'll take one, man. So we have one of those. So that's what we use when we actually use it every game. Obviously if it's nice outside, we don't put hand warmers in it, but once it gets a little cool out, 50 degrees for us is probably half of our season. So
right. Yeah. Well, it's good. So we go bootleg and you guys have the nice stuff. So that's what I took from this. That's good stuff. People be looking that up like crazy. So we'll get into some real ball talk now. So tell me about kind of your influences. I know we've talked a little bit about this. I think you have a really interesting take on the passing game. It's got a lot of cool influences. Kind of what's influenced what you guys have put together at Franklin?
I think like you, Dan Gonzalez has been a huge influence on me. I first came across him, I don't know if it was on social media somewhere or maybe just his website and his blog. And just the way that he explained the passing game, like, to me, I never played quarterback growing up. Like I grew up, I actually played for a wing T team in high school, and I was like a halfback. We had games that we never threw a pass. right? And I played safety on defense. I played both sides of the ball. So like I understood coverages and that stuff, but I never had seen someone talk about the passing game the way that he did, and having like, different ways to go through progressions and different navigation tags, and the ways that he explained being able to, have all these different options basically. When I first got into coaching, we were running like double smash and slant flat on both sides and
Right.
double seams with hitches on the outside. And it was like, you read one guy, and as I started looking into his stuff, that really like expanded my mind, and it took off from there. So, I took a lot from him. And then when I got to Franklin, the guy that was the OC previous to me was still on staff, and he actually had, and I don't remember if he GA'd or if he was like a QC, but he had worked at Bowling Green when Urban Meyer was the head coach. So I learned a bunch from him. And then my first season at Franklin was 2019, which just happened to be the year that, Joe Burrow and Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase were lighting it up at LSU. And that offense, I'm sure everybody, watched that and they were like, oh, this is great. But I really took a deep dive into that offense. I was fortunate that I actually had two guys that I played with in college that were assistant strength coaches at LSU. So I kind of had some access. I had a little bit of an in there. So I kind of had a little bit of inside info on some of the stuff that they were doing. And that offense nowadays is probably the biggest influence on what we do as far as the concepts that we run. And then along with the stuff that I learned from Dan, actually, they're very similar. A lot of the stuff that they did, the way that they were reading plays and looking at things pre-snap, how they were having Joe Burrow decide which side of the field to work. It was a lot of the same stuff that I learned, either reading Dan's books or going through his blog or, listening to him on podcasts. So those probably currently are the two biggest influences that I have as far as the passing game goes. I mean, it's, I think that 2019 LSU team, it's like you can, I go back and watch it just about every offseason still, and you still see things that I'm like, man, that's, the things that they were able to do. And I get like guys will say, well, yeah, they had like 10 first round draft picks. Yes, they did. Right. But the simplicity of what they did, or I shouldn't say simplicity, but like they didn't have a ton of stuff that they did, like they figured out what they were good at and they doubled down on it and they got really, really good at it. And that's what they kept running over and over and over again. And that's kind of the philosophy of where I've tried to go with our offenses. Find those things, a handful of things that we're really good at, and we're going to go with those. Now we'll mix other stuff in. Like, I every year I always have Dan's books. I got the Recoded and Reloaded, and I have the read and shoot ones. I'm always looking through those. Like, all right, there's something I can add. Maybe just for one game. But that's kind of where I'm at right now. Those are definitely the two biggest that I would say currently that we're using stuff from.
Yeah, that's great. I think the thing, I've talked to LSU with several guys, and we've even talked about them on the pod so far, and it's that from that specific season. And I think guys can take from that, sophisticated can be simple. Like sophisticated doesn't have to be complicated. You know what I mean? And like they had a sophisticated system, but it was simple for them, but it had answers for everything that you needed, and they got the ball in playmakers' hands. And I think that's been an influence on what we do too. Like right now, like in your current off-season study, who are you looking at?
So this year, we're in a fortunate position that we have a couple of really good tight ends in our program right now. So I actually looked and watched Georgia just to watch what they were doing with their tight ends, because they're kind of, in the same boat. They'd line up in a lot of 12 personnel, sometimes 13, So I studied a lot of what they did, especially in the run game, how they were able to use those guys, and then just how they were able to formation those guys and move them around. We're in a situation where we have every skill player on our offense is returning from this past year. So we have a really good team coming back. So we feel like we can make another run at a state title this year, but we're going to be mixing in now, a couple of tight ends that are really good. One is going to be a senior, one's going to be a junior. And then we have another that's a receiver that is a bigger body that can slide in there too if we need him. So that was a big one for me, was just checking on what they were doing. Ohio State's been one the past couple of years that I've liked to check out a lot too. I like a lot of the stuff that they do as far as run game. We're a big outside zone duo team. We use a lot of that similar to them. And then the pass game, they've had quite a few pretty cool things. And then I also checked out UCLA this year, kind of for the same reason that I did Georgia, just the way that they were Chip Kelly's gotten more into the, pro style, using tight ends from where he used to be at Oregon. So seeing what they were doing in the run game. I've also been really heavily influenced, like his Y cross and his mesh stuff has been really good for us the past few years. So that's something that I always like to watch and see, like, if he's got any new evolutions with those. So those are the big three that I really checked out.
Yeah, those are really good ones, and that put some really good stuff on film. Being in Georgia myself, Todd Monk and the job that he did, and just, I mean, man, how good they were the last 2 years on offense. And that defense is so good, they didn't get enough credit maybe. And I think this year finally they kind of got out of the shadow, even though that defense was still pretty salty.
Yes.
But they did some really good stuff. Especially if you got a Blake Bowers type guy, you can do a lot of stuff, no doubt about it.
Yep, that helps.
Sure.
As coaches, we know that some of the biggest hurdles to our team's success can come from off the field. Your team needs support to tackle the endless list of expenses, uniforms, training equipment, travel, and more. But raising that money can feel like a full-time job. Thankfully, there's Vertical Raise. Vertical Raise is the premier online fundraising platform using innovative technology to create the easiest and most efficient system available. Raise more money in less time with a local fundraising coach who works with your team every step of the way to customize the ideal fundraiser. With options for online donations, digital discount cards, premium product sales, and even spirit shops, Vertical Raise has top-of-the-line solutions for every fundraising style. To find out more, visit verticalraise.com and we'll get you connected with an exclusive offer on your first fundraiser.
So let's get into some passing actual concepts. And you got some really good stuff, some stuff that we've talked about that I like. And just something, if there was a guy, he's listening to the podcast and maybe he's trying to dip his toe in these passing game waters and he's like, I don't know about all this stuff. These guys, they all wear visors and, what's going on with them? I don't know. But what's a pass play you would say, you know what, you've got to run this pass play. This is really good. And I think, it applies to multiple guys, multiple systems. And let's just start talking about it and you'll kind of coach me up as we go through it.
Right. Yeah. So actually, I'm going to go with the one that, you, me, and Wilkinson were just talking about. This one the other night is, right back to 2019 LSU, right, is the, we call it Chief. It's a corner flat concept to the boundary. You probably saw them run this, I don't know, 7-8 times a game, I'd say. So we run it multiple different formations. We typically do it with a compressed split from our X, and then our back is going to be set to the boundary. And we have the X is going to run a short corner, about an 8-yard corner route with the ability to, he can really flatten that out almost into like a 10-yard out or so, based off of, that dominant position of the corner or how the safety, maybe they cloud it and the safety gets over top, that kind of thing. And then the back is going to release free to the flat, on an arrow, we call an arrow route. He's aiming somewhere 2 to 3 yards deep, running towards the sideline. He can throttle down as he gets outside of the numbers there just to make sure that he's not getting too wide. So that concept, just that side of the field right there, has been one of our most consistently great plays in the passing game. It's great. I love it. It's a good first down play. It's a great, second and short, second and long play. And it's one of our most used or my most called like third and medium concepts as well. I love it there. And then on the backside, the trip side, now this is where, we vary. And I know talking with Jay too, it was interesting. Actually, we had made the exact same adjustment to this play. LSU originally did it with drive on the backside. So they'd have they'd probably run it from a 3x1 with like a, the Y off. He'd run a dig. And then the number 2 is going to run the shallow cross. And then the number 1 is going to run like the 5-yard in route behind it. Now on paper, and you could draw it on the whiteboard, if you're looking at how it plays out and how the defense can cover it, like let's say, whether the corner is going to cloud, right. And then the safety is going to take, the corner route, and then you have the dig and the shallow coming in, you should be able to, you would assume the way things play out that one of those routes is going to come into your vision open, or, if the corner drops off, the linebacker chases, the boundary safety kicks to the field, you would assume that you're going to have one of those routes coming in. And for whatever reason, we just never had success with that. So what we did is we actually changed it now to having like a middle read-ish type route, kind of like a pipe route right down the middle of the field from our number 3. And he can kind of bend that off too if he needs to, like especially if we see like a 1 high, which we don't see much of. And then number 2 is going to run like a 5-yard whip route. And then number 1 is going to run a 10-yard speed dig coming in. And the way that we've gone to reading it now is, we, like I said, Dan and LSU, I took Dan's, what he calls a numbers read or a niner read in his system. And we've applied that to it so that we're going to have our quarterback got eyes right down the hash, being that boundary safety. And if that safety kicks to the field, if he rotates back to the field, then we know we're working the corner to the flat. Or if he's going to play out, like let's say they're playing cloud and that safety is going to come off the hash and widen over the corner, now we know that we're going to work back to the field. And that's been one of our most consistently great plays for us. I mean, whether we've hit the front side of the corner, that's probably, I would say, 70% of the time, or we've had a ton of success in the intermediate game hitting that dig route on the backside too. So that's been, like I said, just an outstanding concept once we made that switch. But before it was like, if we didn't hit the corner or the flat, I kind of felt like our quarterback got hung out to dry a little bit sometimes for whatever reason. I don't know what it was, because like I said, and we talked about this the other night, on paper and on the whiteboard, like it should work, right? Like it theoretically should work, but we just weren't able to pull it off. So once we made that change of that backside, it's been really good too. And we've had times too where we've ran some stuff. We've ran like an inverted smash on the backside as well from time to time, just depending on what we're seeing from the defense. But yeah, that's been probably, aside from like our middle read 3 verticals concept, probably our most used pass play the past few years.
Yeah, that's a really good pass play. So I've got a couple questions for you on it. So the shortened corner route, like what's the thought process behind, going 8 yards or having a little bit quicker of a corner route and that boundary route, maybe what a lot of guys are used to with a 10 to 12-yard corner?
Yeah, well, into the boundary, obviously your space is compressed at the high school level with the wide hashes. So that's part of it. The other thing too is we don't compress the X's split a ton. So I feel like some teams catch on to it,
Right.
and they used to see, like, I think a lot of guys look at it on film and they see, okay, well, he's running a corner route. Like he's probably going to get to, 10 to 12 yards and run a corner route. And I don't know how detailed everybody is, but I know I can tell from experience that there are guys that clearly didn't scout that well enough and realize that we do cut it a little bit short. And we've been able to break it off underneath either, like I said, either a corner that's dropped off in quarters, or if they're playing cloud, the safety coming over the top, we've been able to hit it underneath quite a bit. So that was one of them. The other one too is we will run a double move off of it. We'll run the cop route or corner post off of it. That's been a pretty good play for us. That kind of creates the space versus all of a sudden, if you're normally running it at 10 to 12 yards and hey, he cuts it short at 8, we didn't want it to be a tip against a kid that was a better player that could read that. So those are a couple of the reasons why we do it that way.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a great answer. When you run the cop with the single, do you go back to having more of that drive type concept to the middle of the field so it's getting underneath the safety? Is that kind of what you're working?
Yes, exactly. Yep. It's going to look like we basically take the number 3 that's running kind of that middle pipe route, and we have him also run a dig. So you're going to basically get a dig from 3, a dig for 1, and then the whip route from number 2. So that way, yeah, we tell him when we do that, I want you to run right at that weak side safety and like stare him down directly to his face and try to get his attention. Because we see a decent amount of teams that are going to play like solo poach or whatever guys call it, that kind of thing. We see a good amount of that. So if we're getting that look, that's a great situation that we're going to call that cop route.
Yeah, you talked about that middle read and number 3 going vertical. And I just think that's something guys don't do enough of. It's a cheat code for the quarterback in figuring out the coverage, because who carries number 3 vertical, and it clears out space. And so I think you're making a great point about that, just about what it does defensively. You can immediately figure out what that boundary safety is doing and whether or not you're going to be clean into the boundary. And it's a really good idea. And I think the great thing about that concept you're going over is, anytime you've got something that's a good P and 10, first and 10, third medium type pass, that's what you want a pass to be. If it's good in all those situations, then it's just a ball play and it's a good all around, pass. And I know all of us are looking for those plays that Lincoln Riley talks about that are good against 80% of coverages that we just feel good about. So that's really good, really good. I think anybody listening should be able to take that and be like, hey, I can do this regardless of offense. It's a simple concept. It's got a smash, sort of a curl flat. It's draining out coverage with number 3. Is a great play. So really like that one myself. So
it's also great from different formations too. I was going to mention we like to split our you can do it with like a nub tight end set. It's good from that. We'll go like the nub tight end, flex our tight end out a little bit too, especially if you want a bigger body matched up on a smaller corner or something over there. So very versatile.
That's good. Great point. You'll see that's a great pass for, maybe we don't see it as much in high school, but all those NFL and college teams that are going to be in that slightly flex tight end nub set where it gives you kind of a man zone coverage indicator. It's a really good pass for that. So versatile. That's such a good play. So let's talk really quick, passing game podcast. Let's talk quarterbacks for a second. I know, in my opinion, I think you're pretty up on the newest, kind of latest quarterback stuff. I'm a big Tom House guy, and he said, he has a quote. I'm butchering the quote, but I love this. I say it all the time to my quarterbacks. But Tom House said something to the effect of, every one of us is coaching something now that we'll be wrong about in 5 years. And I think that applies more probably to quarterback coaching right now than anything in the game of football. Now some of this was like hubris and overconfidence, but I'm telling you, 10 years ago, I felt like I understood the science of throwing motion. I felt like I understood biomechanics a little bit, and I could use these fancy words. And 10 years later, I'm like, I don't know squat about quarterback play. And it's evolving and changing. And the stuff that these guys told us was science 10 years ago, that this is inescapable science. Now it's like, oh, that's totally wrong. That's not what Patrick Mahomes does anymore. It's not what Tom Brady does. So I want to talk to you a little bit about how coaching quarterbacks has evolved for you, or what you've seen that's different now than what's been going on out there, maybe just a few years ago, and kind of how fast this thing is advancing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a constant evolution. Yeah, I feel like you said, I feel like there's sometimes where I go like a month later and I'm like, oh damn, what I was doing that a couple weeks ago, and now I'm already like, oh man, I got to change this stuff. So it happens quick. Yeah. I think I went from being, especially me, I've been kind of doing the quarterback training stuff for almost 10 years now. 2015 is when I started. I kind of just got into it like sort of by accident. I had a kid on my team that was going to work with a private QB trainer down in the Chicago area, and he was starting up a new camp series. You guys have probably heard of it. It's called Rise and Fire. It's pretty big in Chicago. And he asked if I would be willing to help out at the camp. And I was like, yeah, sure, I can come learn and, help out at a camp, get paid a little money, get a bunch of free gear. Like, yeah, I'm all in. So I did that. And then in the process, like, just happened to meet a bunch of kids that were there that were from like the Milwaukee area. They asked me if I would be interested in doing some private training for them, just because it was closer than them driving all the way to Chicago. So that's kind of how I got into it. But back at that stage, I knew like next to nothing about like throwing mechanics and that kind of stuff. So, I was like, thinking like, okay, well, what other positions throw things, and I was like, okay, well, a pitcher, in baseball, because I played baseball growing up. So, I was teaching things that like, you do with a pitcher, like the old, like, all right, break the glass with your elbow type thing,
right.
Which come to find out is like the exact opposite of what you want to be doing.
Exactly.
It's just things like that. So it's gotten, to the point of, I think sometimes like you go on social media and it's like, guys are arguing over some stupid stuff. And it's like, I try not to get involved in a whole lot of that stuff, but I think where we're at right now is, I think probably I've gotten to like less is more with certain things. Like I've found kind of the few things that I feel like are the really key things. Stride length and ball separation is a big one, and making sure that you're not separating too early, that, your stride is timed up with your arms hitting opposite equal. I feel like those are pretty good, a starting point that, a lot of kids struggle with. Their stride is too big, too long, or they're separating too early, which is allowing their arms are getting ahead of their lower body too much. That's a big one. As far as like the arm path and all that stuff goes, to be honest with you, I very rarely mess with the kids' arm. They're throwing actual like arm throwing motion. Like I just don't do a ton with that, because I did for a little while and I felt like I screwed the kids up, to be honest with you. I made it worse. So I kind of got away from doing that and focused on the few things that I felt like really could make a difference. So like, the stride length, the opposite equal. And then the other couple of things that we talk about were, being really strong on the front side with like your front arm, keeping that front foot solid in the ground, a little knee bend, that kind of thing. And then really focus on, like the quick sudden acceleration and then the quick sudden deceleration are big things that we focus on right now. And then extension is a big deal for us, extending out there, getting the elbow extended, snapping the wrist off. Those are the big three things that probably I spend the most time mechanically working with kids on. We do a lot of that. And then it's, beyond that, we probably, like, if you came to a session with me, that's probably the first 20 minutes is working on mechanics. And then the rest of it, like, we're going to get out there and we're going to get rolling. Like, we're going to bring receivers in. We're going to go through pass drops. We're going to work on how to read the field, eye progression. That was something that was like where I think Dan really opened my eyes, was eye progressions, and how the eyes move and scan into routes and that kind of thing. So working and helping kids do that has been something that I've really spent time on. Like, how do you work to the backside of a progression? Like, how do you get from like the front side of a flood concept all the way back to like your dig on the backside if you need it, that kind of thing. Like, I when you watch kids at our level, at least in Wisconsin, just because we don't pass the ball so much, you very rarely see a kid able to do that. So that's something that, those kinds of things that we try to spend time on, where hitting those kinds of things, being able to throw the ball in rhythm is another thing that surprisingly probably 80% of kids can't do when they first start out. They get their weight back too far and then they have to hitch up. That's another big one. Those types of things like that. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. Like I said, it's a lot like less is more when it comes to the mechanical stuff, and then focusing on those few key kind of points. And then we just drill the heck out of those and really focus on those.
That's so good. The customization of quarterback coaching now, just like everything in our life is customized, but you pretty much, the best quarterback coaches are customizing what they're doing to those kids instead of saying, here's my box that you're all going to fit in. And I think that's one of the benefits. And it's why quarterbacks are so much more advanced, so much better. That being said, as well as I do, if you're a quarterback coach or a strength coach and you put anything you do on the internet these days, you're either really courageous or really arrogant or really ignorant, because they are coming for you. Like, it doesn't matter who you are. Yep. It doesn't matter if 20 NFL guys train with you, like some of these guys, somebody's going to get on there and say, you're teaching this wrong or whatever. So, I'll put game film. I'm not even putting indie film on there. I can't deal with it, man. I don't need that negativity.
100%. Yeah, and then guys are stealing other guys' video and stuff. I mean, it's crazy right now. Yeah, it's getting to be I'm like, even like, there's been times where I've thought about, like, man, maybe it's time for social media me to take a break. Like, I just can't handle it. Like, I go on there and it's just so much like arguing and negativity about some of that stuff. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right, man. I mean, it's crazy, the things that you see out there.
No doubt. Well, don't get off there. We need some positive voices out there, or it's going to be bad. So let's hang in there. So we're kind of getting to the end. We're going to go into a question we ask every guest, and this is we have all this high level ball talk and just some great stuff, and this is the stuff people really want to hear, Drew. So we are going to talk about being an OC. What do you wear on your head during a game? Is it a ball cap? Is it a visor? It's cold weather for you, so I'm assuming there's a cold weather answer. What do you wear on your head during a game?
Yeah, well, there's two answers. So when the weather is nice outside, I have I got a hat from our baseball team. It's the hat that our baseball team wears. It's they're dome hats. It's black. They're all black, and they got a white front with our FS logo on it, which is like the same as the Florida State. We're the Franklin Sabres, so we got the FS Franklin Sabres. That's what I wear when it's nice outside. And once it gets cold out, we have our D coordinator owns his own like apparel business, I guess. So nice. He usually brings in some new winter stocking hats every year. So this year we had some nice black Nike ones that just had Franklin Sabres and the Sabre logo on there. So that's my go-to when it's cold. And honestly, once I go up to the booth, usually the hat comes off and the headset goes on.
I got you. So the last question. So you and I both know Jay, friends with Jay Wilkinson. He's a huge Red Bull guy. There are guys that are, pure water before the game. Everybody talks about how old I am because, like, my pregame ritual, my wife will bring the kids for a second when we're kind of watching the kids. She'll bring me a cup of coffee. I'm not a luck guy, but it's just a routine. She brings me coffee. I hug the kids. So I'm a coffee guy, and all the guys on our staff talk about how old I am. But what's your pregame drink, or even during the game drink? I'm a Coke in the press box. I try not to drink carbonated beverages, but in the press box, man, I'm going through 2 20-ounce Cokes, and I'll have coffee before the game. So I'm caffeinated during the game. So what about you?
So I'm not a big like energy drink or soda drinker. I'm relatively health conscious, so I try to stay away from that stuff. But I buy these little packets of it's like an electrolyte mix called Element. It's just like spelled out LMNT. So I buy that stuff, and then I have a supplement that I take. It's from a company called Thorn Supplements. I forget the name of exactly what the supplement itself is called, but it's something to do with like memory. It's got, like ginkgo, and like it's got a little caffeine and all these things that are supposed to be good for brain health and like helping you focus and that kind of stuff. So I pop 2 of those, and then I drink my electrolyte mix. I have that. So I take those.
You're making us all feel bad, Drew. You're making us all feel bad for being health conscious, and that's no good, man. And they need to give you an endorsement for naming this company. So see if you can get an endorsement deal for this.
That's a good deal. Yeah. So I take those probably, I'd say, like 5 o'clock, for a 7 o'clock game. So that way that I know like the caffeine gives me a little jolt beforehand. I don't like to, I used to be, when I first started coaching and I was younger, we had a guy on staff that would go to like a Costco and buy a case of the NOS energy drinks. You remember NOS energy? They probably got like 600 milligrams of caffeine. And I remember taking those down and then like not being able to sleep for 2 days after that. So I got away from those probably 5 or 6 years ago. But so I know what it's like, and I've experienced the energy drink craze, but I got out of that just because I don't know. I feel like I can sit. I like to be nice and calm and focused up there, and I got too little. I was getting a little hyped when I had the energy drinks.
Yeah, I think truck drivers and football coaches are keeping those energy drink companies in business. With maybe if we were more health conscious like you, we'd all be better off. There's no doubt.
No doubt.
So, Drew, great stuff, man. Really enjoyed it. I think anybody's going to get something out of this. There's some really good things there. I've already got a page full of notes just talking to you. Really appreciate you being on the show. Just appreciate you sharing your knowledge with everybody. And I hope to talk to you again soon.
For sure, man. I appreciate you having me.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And we'll see you next time on the Passing Lab.
Josh, what's great about these episodes is there's always a ton of takeaways. So I know when I ask you to boil it down to 3 for us, that has to be a tough one. So what are your 3 for this week?
Oh, there's a lot of good stuff in this one. You're right. It is tough. But 3 things that really stuck out to me is I think the very first thing you're going to hear when we talk about, or you heard when we talk about the pod, is the bad weather issue. And the myth that you can't throw cold weather or bad weather. And Drew kind of disproved that and talked about some of the statistics that they had and how successful they've been. And I think that can give guys a lot of confidence. And obviously, if you watch some NFL football, you see some adverse weather conditions too. But we can do that at the high school level as well. One of my favorite things, Drew goes over a great passing concept and the chief concept that we discussed. And I think the idea behind having passes in your system, I probably use the term attitude passes too much, but I love that as just being, because you hear so much about attitude runs, and having those passes that are good P and 10 to start drives, that are great on third down, and that are good in the red zone. And if you can really look at your passing game and you can say, does this pass have those 3 ingredients? It's something you can carry into every game. So having those passes carry into every single game, really big at the high school level where we're so worried about reps and allowing guys to be able to execute passes from the varsity all the way down to the junior varsity level. I think the third thing I really liked is Drew is also a quarterback trainer. And so not only is he a coach, a lot of times, there's a disconnect between high school coaches maybe and quarterback trainers and almost a little bit of a rivalry. But Drew trains quarterbacks as well as coaches at the high school level. And he talked about something I think every quarterback coach probably needs to hear, which is the less is more approach. Kind of as we're changing the changing landscape of coaching quarterbacks, over-coaching things can be really dangerous with some of these guys. So have those quick verbal phrases you can use that kind of stick in those kids' heads, and find the things that are simple that can make those guys better. Don't try and transform everybody and start with a blank slate. Kind of work with them where they're at and use a less is more approach. I thought that was great hearing that from not just a trainer, but a high school coach.
As you said, some great takeaways there, and the game has changed in a lot of ways. I agreed in what he said is like what you might have been doing a couple of years ago or even a couple of weeks ago, people may have moved on from. So it's always about keeping up with the game. And when I think of the game changing too, man, I think back to my high school days. There were a handful of teams at that time who had turf fields. You were playing in the mud. And it probably was more true then that you couldn't throw the ball at certain points in the year. Those things did affect it. But now, I mean, he pointed out even how they keep a dry football on you with your Chick-fil-A trick there in the South. So multiple ways you can do it.
Right.
Another great episode here on the Passing Lab. And we're at the halfway point of these. We're going to do an 8-week series of these. So we've done 4, and I know we have some exciting guests coming up, and I appreciate the time you're putting into this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm enjoying it a lot, Keith, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Be sure you check out Josh Herring's resources on the passing game. They are some of the best out there. I'll put a link to those. They're on CoachTube. You can find the link in the show notes. Follow all we're doing at coachingcoordinator.com. Go there for enhanced show notes with things like the diagram of the chief concept that Coach Ambrose shared today. We have our winning edge takeaways detailed in text and more. Again, go to coachingcoordinator.com and follow me on Twitter at Coach K. Grabowski.